Hey everybody! Welcome to this day of the week that's between Thursday and Saturday. The day we always do our shout-outs, our story, and groaner of the week. I'm not going to say what day it is. It just falls between Thursday and Saturday on most weeks, so welcome. Let's get to our shout-outs. We have 3 shout-outs this week. The first one is for Tag Team Recoveries, a group of gentlemen in the southeastern U.S. who do a lot of metal detecting, mostly around Civil War sites and campsites and that, trying to recover and preserve and save articles and relics from the Civil War era. Although I'm sure if they come across the odd coin or two that's spendable, they don't mind slipping those in their pockets as well. So anyway, please check out Tag Team Recoveries. The next one is a gentleman named John, who has a metal detecting channel as well, Digging Into Yesterday. And he's quite an interesting fellow to follow. So encourage you to go over and check out John's channel and give him some love and support. Digging Into Yesterday. And our third channel used to be known as Ray the Explorer, and he has since changed his channel name. So if you're looking for Ray, you now will find him under East Tennessee Explorers. That's with the S on the end, because his wife Amy goes with him. So East Tennessee Explorers, and he does mostly kind of urbexes and that on abandoned places in East Tennessee, some in Virginia, and that area of East Tennessee. If you're familiar with East Tennessee, up in the east corner, there's an area called the Tri-Cities area. So it's Johnson City, Bristol, and Kingsport. And many years ago, before I was as young as I am now, I lived in Kingsport, Tennessee for a few years, and that is where Ray and Amy hang their hats, is in Kingsport, and work out of there. But some very, very interesting videos, so please check out East Tennessee Explorers. All right, now we're ready to move on with The Answers Man, a Frank and Abby mystery, and this week we are on Chapter 4. So I'll put links to the 3 previous chapters down below in the description. If you haven't watched those videos, you might want to do that before you watch this one, or you may be confused as to what's going on. But for those of you who have been following along and know what's happening, let's jump right in. As promised, I picked Abby up at her home at 9:30 a.m. Sunday morning, and we drove to Lauder City. I filled her in regarding my Saturday inquiries and the discovery that 2 men dressed in beige coveralls driving a pale blue van had removed a large rolled carpet from the church. It may be a wild goose chase, but first thing Monday morning I'd like you to check the rental agencies to see if any of them rented out a blue cargo van last week, I instructed. This may be our big break. I'm glad you got this information, Frank, and I'll check it out, but, she hesitated before going on, if you're going to go out like that, perhaps you should let me know, just in case something should happen to you. Why, Abigail Barstow, I do believe you worry about me, I said with a wink at her. Well, of course I do, she said with a smile. Without you, I'd have no job. But seriously, Frank, someone should know where you are, or where you intend to go. You could be placing yourself in danger. The last thing we need is for you to end up missing like Pastor Wainwright. I conceded the point and promised in future to keep her informed of my whereabouts. As we pulled into the church parking lot, Abby suddenly asked me, "So who am I?" Hey, bud, you want to come up too? Okay, there we go. Yeah, you listening to the story, are you? Well, you gotta say hi. Everybody likes to see you, so say hi. Say hi, everybody. I'm here. I came to listen to Chapter 4 too. Yeah. You want to read Frank's part and I'll read Abby's part? Does that sound like a plan? Okay. Oh, you're just passing through. Okay. Well, let's repeat that last bit. So we got kind of sidetracked there, didn't we? As we pulled into the church parking lot, Abby suddenly asked me, "So who am I?" "What do you mean?" I asked, my confusion clear in my voice. Well, we're walking into a church service as a couple. So, am I your girlfriend, your sister, your cousin, or your wife, or what? We need to have a cover. We need to have a cover story in case someone asks, Abby stated. Her point was indeed a good one, but I couldn't resist teasing a little. Well, which one would you like to be, the first or last? I asked with a sly wink. Abby punched me lightly in the shoulder. Don't flatter yourself, Buster. I'll be your cousin who's visiting from out of town. Are we at least kissing cousins? I joked. Abby stuck her tongue out at me as we exited the car. We were warmly greeted as we entered the church. There were a large number of people in attendance, including some media types. I guess word of the missing pastor was starting to attract more than passing attention. The service was nice. The praise time was inspiring, although one could feel the tension in the congregation. Prayers were offered for Pastor Wainwright's safe return and for those who were sick. Sadly, the sermon had to be one of the worst I'd ever heard. The young fellow who gave it hummed and erred his way through what seemed like 30 minutes of a rambling diatribe on living the Christian life. By the time he finished, the entire congregation was restless. The Pew Bulletin identified him as Robert Thomas, interim pastor. Following the service, several people came up and invited us to come to coffee in the church hall. We accepted the invitation and mingled for a while. The talk was, of course, all about what could have happened to Pastor Dennis. Fate and Sally came up and introduced themselves to us. I asked them who the young pastor was that had preached the morning message. Robert is the grandson of Mildred Thomas, one of our longtime members. He just graduated from seminary last month and is seeking a calling. When he heard about Pastor Wainwright's disappearance, he offered to fill in until Pastor Dennis returns. It may not sound very Christian of me, but from what I had to listen to this morning, I pray to God you find Pastor Dennis, and soon, Fate sighed. Sally nodded her agreement. The sooner Pastor Wainwright returns, the better. Robert means well, but his sermons just don't seem inspired. He has been after Pastor Dennis to let him preach for a while now. Pastor allowed him to preach at Easter, and that was a disaster. So Pastor Dennis hasn't been too accommodating since. Needless to say, Mildred hasn't been too pleased with Pastor's position. In her eyes, the sun rises and sets in young Robert. As they say, love is blind. I think, in this case, deaf might be a better word, Fate muttered. Cousin Abby and I stayed a while longer, listening to the chatter of the members to see if we could pick up anything helpful. We were introduced to Mrs. Wainwright, the pastor's mother, and a few other members of the congregation. Abby even volunteered to help in the kitchen with the dishes, hoping perhaps she might overhear something useful. After spending a sociable amount of time and gaining no information of any use, we said our goodbyes and left. How about lunch before we head home? I asked. I don't know about you, but I'm starving. That would be nice, Abby agreed. Could we please not go to a fast food place? I like to sit and be waited on for a change. Your wish is my command, I replied. How about going to Bergman's Bistro? I hear they have a wonderful Sunday brunch menu. That would be wonderful. I've heard good things about the restaurant, but I've never been there, Abby said as she pulled down the visor and checked herself in the vanity mirror. Do I look okay? You look fine. You'll be the prettiest undercover agent in the place. If I wasn't mistaken, I'm sure I saw a slight blush appear on Abby's cheeks. Thank you, I think, Abby replied. A short while later, we were comfortably ensconced in a corner booth at Bergman's. We perused the menu in silence, and then, having placed our orders, both started to talk at the same time. Please go ahead and tell me what you were going to say, I politely offered. Oh no, you say whatever it was you were going to say, Abby replied. Do you want to ruin my reputation as a gentleman? I insist. You start. Abby laughed and then launched into what she had to say. I really didn't hear anything that would point to the pastor's whereabouts or what might have happened to him, but I certainly got the impression that he is well liked and really missed already. I agree with your summation. It If I was going to suspect anyone in the church, it would be that young preacher, I stated, and then looked at Abby to see her reaction. There's just something about him that doesn't sit right with me. Abby looked at me with an expression of shock. You can't think he's a bad person just because he's a poor preacher. Maybe his ministry gifts lay elsewhere. Perhaps he has great empathy or is great at working with youth. Well, I suppose you have a point. Being a poor preacher isn't a crime, but there's just something about him that felt odd, I continued. He seemed nervous and preoccupied, even at coffee time after the service. I also noticed he left early, and in a way that almost looked like he was sneaking out. At that point, the waitress brought our food, refilled our coffee cups, and asked if we would like anything else. Having received a thank you and our assurance that we had everything we wanted, she left us to tend to her other customers. I think that earring I found may be an important clue, yet somehow it doesn't fit with our lead, I said. It will be interesting to see if we get a response to the ad I placed and who it is who responds. Abby remained quiet for a moment, then gazed off out the window. I see what you mean about the earring. It was dropped in the office around the time of the pastor's disappearance, and yet the boy who witnessed the rug being taken out said it was 2 men. I know some men wear earrings, but not usually clip-ons or of the style you described. It's the type of earring I would call an old lady earring, and I somehow can't picture an elderly woman disguising herself as a man and hauling bodies around in rolled-up rugs. That is exactly what I was thinking. We must be missing something. Perhaps we're thinking too hard about it all. I leaned back in my seat and took a sip of coffee. How was your 3-egg omelet? It's really good. How about your 3-egg omelet? She asked with a smile. Well, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would rate it about an 8.5, I replied. It's very good, but it's missing that little something that would give it a wow taste. So are you saying you've had a better omelet elsewhere? She asked with mock surprise. Why, yes, Abby, that is exactly what I'm saying, I responded with a grin. I know somewhere that makes an omelet that makes your taste buds stand up and say, wow. So where is this place that has an omelet that has the wow factor and would rate higher than 8.5 out of 10? Abby challenged. Why, right in our little hometown of Ryerville, I answered. Have you lost all sense of taste and reality? There's no way that Arnie at the Ryerville Cafe could come close to making an omelet this good, Abby exclaimed. My good lady, I don't recall having mentioned Arnie's or the Ryerville Cafe, I said with an exaggerated look of shock. Well, where else in Ryerville could you get an omelet? She challenged. The cafe is our only eatery. I raised an eyebrow at her and replied, in the kitchen of yours truly. But don't take my word for it. I'll make you one sometime and let you be the judge. However, before you think I'm being brash, egotistical, and full of myself, I will tell you that I can't take credit for how great the omelets I make are. Yarrick was our next-door neighbor, and he and I became quite close. I sort of thought of him as another grandfather. Anyway, he taught me how to cook, including a few secrets that can put some pizzazz into some everyday dishes. All right, I will gladly take on the job of judging and rating your omelet against this one. Is there somewhere I can sign up for more of this type of work? Abby asked. I only cook if I absolutely have to, so taste testing would be a good way to avoid it. I like the way you think, but I enjoy cooking, so I certainly wouldn't challenge you for the job, I said. Seeing the pleasure people get out of enjoying a well-prepared meal, to me, is the best part of all. I guess that's why I don't cook much just for me. We finished the rest of our brunch talking about the goings-on in Ryerville and several of the characters in town. I was still getting to know people and trying to figure out who was related to whom. It was slowly coming together, But it didn't help that there were 5 men with the name of Jacob, 2 Toms, and 4 Jameses that I'd met so far. I always had to interrupt the conversation to clarify which Jacob, Tom, or James the person was talking about. We finished our lunch and headed back to Ryerville. The first part of our journey home we spent in companionable silence. "Motive!" Abby suddenly exclaimed. "What are you talking about?" I asked, having been startled out of my thoughts by her sudden outburst. "There must be a motive for kidnapping Pastor Wainwright," Abby said with satisfaction. "In all the crime shows I watch, there are 2 things the detectives always look for, and 2 of them are motive and opportunity. So what would be the motive, and who would have motive to kidnap Pastor?" "Wow, you're right," I said, a bit embarrassed. I hadn't thought of that. Someone would need a good reason to risk taking him from the church in broad daylight. Tomorrow I'll go back and talk some more with Sally and Fate and see if they can shed some light on why someone might kidnap the pastor. Although I guess we sort of touched on that when we talked about the wolf in sheep's clothing idea. We need to pursue that angle a bit more. The motive obviously isn't money. If it were, I would think a ransom note would have been delivered by now. Even though we haven't solved this case yet, in my heart I feel like we're making really good progress and on the right track, Abby said with a contented sigh. Solving this could really help bring in future business. Her intuition gave me some hope. I felt strongly that we were pursuing the right line of thought to solve the case. If we could just connect the dots, so to speak, and fill in the blanks, it would all come together. We reached Ryerville and I dropped Abby at her home. I parked my car behind the office and then, feeling a bit restless, went for a long walk along one of the grid roads to clear my head and stop thinking about the case. I figured that maybe it was like trying to remember a name. The harder you tried, the less likely you were to remember it. But once you started thinking about something else, the name usually popped into your mind. I was hoping that might work in this case. But of course, the harder I tried to think of other things, the more the case worked its way into my thoughts. I finally gave up and went home, hoping perhaps to read a good book and relax for the remainder of the day. And that ends chapter 4. So tune in next week, the same time, same station, for the continuing saga of The Answers Man in chapter 5. All right, now you're all saying, okay, we've had our shout-outs. Time for our groaner. We want our groaner. Well, indeed, the groaner this week is a groaner. This was a letter written many years ago. You'll tell by some of the dates in it. To the Department of Agriculture in the United States by a gentleman farmer. And so I will read the letter to you. And it's addressed to the Secretary of the Agricultural Department. Dear Mr. Secretary, my friend Bordeaux received a $1,000 check from the government for not raising hogs, and so I am going into the not raising hogs business. What I want to know is, what is the best kind of land not to raise hogs on? And what is the best kind of hogs not to raise? I would prefer not to raise razorbacks, but if this is not the best kind not to raise, I would just as gladly not raise Durocs or Poland Chinas. The hardest part of this business is going to be keeping an individual record for each of the hogs I do not raise. My friend Bordeaux has been raising hogs for more than 20 years, and the most he ever made was $400 in 1918, until this year when he received $1,000 for not raising hogs. Now, if I get $1,000 for not raising 50 hogs, will I get $2,000 for not raising 100 hogs? I plan to start off on a small scale, holding myself down to not raising 4,000 hogs, for which I will, of course, receive $80,000. Now, these hogs I will not raise will not eat 100,000 bushels of corn. I understand you pay farmers for, for not raising corn. Will you pay me for not raising 100,000 bushels of corn, which I will not feed to the hogs which I am not going to raise? I want to get started as soon as possible, as this looks like a good time of year for not raising hogs. Yours very truly, October Bouchard. So there you go. If you don't know what to do with yourself, just go into the not raising hogs business and you'll do very well. Alrighty, until Tuesday when we come up with some creative delight in the kitchen, have a wonderful weekend. Take care, stay safe, and God bless.